Well, hello everyone. We want to welcome you to our current Bible study. We've been studying our community Bible study sessions from week to week, and I believe this is session number 5. And so we are looking to begin our study tonight on the message of the second angel. So, the first study that we did was on the message of the first angel, and we looked at the everlasting gospel. We looked at what that meant. We studied what it meant to fear God and to give Him glory. We looked at what it means to worship Him who made heaven and earth. And so now we're going to look at the message of the second angel. The second angel has a different message, and let's begin by moving to our screen here. Here we go. All right. The message of the second angel, the identification of Babylon and her fall. So, what is the message of the second angel? Well, in Revelation 14 and verse 8, it begins with this. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now, this particular message differs from the first angel's message in that there are no commands designed to effect obedience, for instance. Instead, it is an indictment. It's an indictment of Babylon, and it's designed to help us to understand that Babylon is actually personified as she, and also that great city. So what could those references mean, she and that great city? Let's take a closer look. Remember, when we study the Bible, the key is to remember that we are to let the Bible explain itself. In other words, we're not to go to other sources to figure out what the biblical symbols mean. Of course, Revelation is a book of the Bible that is filled with symbols, and those symbols can be found elsewhere in the Bible. So when we see references to Babylon, we have to go to other places in the Bible that mention Babylon, and from the details that are given, we can decipher what Babylon really means and figure out the symbolism used there. So where else in the book of Revelation do we see Babylon mentioned? And what other details about her are presented? Well, we find that Revelation 17 and 18 have lots of detail concerning Babylon. The angel said to John, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters. Now, Revelation 17 actually explains what the angel explains what many waters means. It means multitudes and nations and languages. So it's talking about people in general when it says sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now that's Revelation 17, 2-3. So here is this woman sitting on a scarlet beast. Now a beast usually represents a nation or a political power, as we mentioned the last time. And we find in verse 4 of Revelation 17, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Now keep that in mind, those colors, because those colors mean something when we identify the beast. The woman and the beast itself. And adorned with gold and precious stones, pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations. Now remember, the previous verse said that the cup had wine. But this tells you what the wine is. The wine is the abominations of this harlot, and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So there's that word abomination again. So not only is she the mother of harlots, but in meaning, of course, that she has some harlot daughters, but she's also the mother of the abominations of the earth. Notice? So, verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. Now, here we find that this woman is a persecuting woman. In fact, she is persecuting the people of God, the saints, and also the martyrs of Jesus. She's putting them to death. Now, harlotry is an interesting word that has been applied to the people of Israel in the past. In Exodus 19, God proposed a marriage covenant with Israel, and he said this to them, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, covenant of course is a reference to his law, which he was going to give them in a short time, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That term, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, by the way, is picked up later on in the New Testament by the Apostle Peter, and he uses it to refer to the Christian church. So the same term that the Lord used to describe his relationship with and the status of the people of Israel back then, the time of Israel, is the same term that he uses to describe the Christian church, that the Apostle Peter does. Pardon me. So, what happened when God proposed this marriage covenant? Well, Israel agreed immediately to the marriage covenant, but as soon as they had agreed to the covenant, almost immediately, really, they began to go astray and break the covenant by following the idolatrous customs of the surrounding nations. And of course, that was displeasing to God. And we find that God had to change his relationship with them. In fact, he referred to them as harlots. Notice, but you trusted in your own beauty, played the harlot because of your fame, and poured out your harlotry on everyone passing by who would have it. You took some of your garments and adorned multicolored high places for yourself and played the harlot on them. Such things should not happen nor be. You have also taken your beautiful jewelry from my gold and my silver, notice the house of the Lord, which I had given you, and made for yourself male images and played the harlot with them. This is Ezekiel 16, verses 15 to 17. Now, this harlotry that the Lord indicts them with is the harlotry of apostasy. In fact, it really is this straying from allegiance to God and his covenant law, which, of course, forbids idolatry. And they were deep in idolatry. And so the Lord referred to them as harlots. Now, who or what is Babylon? That's a question that we hope to provide an answer to tonight. Who or what is Babylon? Well, Babylon has to be a professed church of Christ. Otherwise, the Lord would not refer to her as a harlot. So that's number one. This church has to be global, a global system that has departed from the true faith. The cup represents the false doctrines that she has passed on to her daughter churches. Remember, she is called Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots. She's also a persecuting church. Remember, we read that she was drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. So she is guilty of putting to death those who are truly following Jesus and following the Bible. So that's something to remember. Now, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17 all present a persecuting power that has supremacy for 1,260 years. Now, in Daniel 7, the persecuting power is said to have dominion for a time and times and the dividing of times, which is 3.5 years, right? And so what we have there then is, just a minute, I'm having a little trouble with my OBS. Okay, what we have then is a persecuting church that has supremacy for 1,260 years. If you calculate all of those references to time, they all come out to the same number, 1,260, a day for a year. So all of them are pointing to a period of supremacy that this church would have. Now, all three accounts of this persecuting church power accuse her of blasphemy, assuming the prerogatives of God. That's in Daniel 7:25, where it says that the little horn power would think to change times and laws. But in Revelation 13, in that account of this church power, the beast receives a deadly wound. And the second beast of Revelation 13, the land beast, helps him to recover by creating an image to the sea beast. And we're going to study that when we study the mark of the beast and so on, and the image to the beast. In the Daniel 7 account, the persecuting little horn church power comes up after the fourth beast power, which is Rome. Don't forget that the four beasts that are mentioned in Daniel 7 is a lion, representing Babylon, a bear, representing Medo-Persia, because Medo-Persia conquered Babylon, a leopard, representing Greece, because Greece conquered Medo-Persia, and finally, a dragon beast, the fourth beast, representing Rome, because Rome displaced the Greek Empire under Alexander. And so this little horn power, church power, comes up after the fourth beast power, Rome, is divided into 10 kingdoms. There is only one conclusion that we can reach from that, and that is this church has to be a Roman church, because it comes up among the 10 kingdoms of the Roman Empire in Europe. According to Revelation 13, the dragon, Rome, gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. And that's exactly what happened. After the 10 kingdoms were established and the Roman Church came into power, it became the dominant power in all of Europe. And so what we have there is a 1260-year period of domination by the Roman Church that we all know as the Dark Ages. This is the time when lots of people were put to death because they did not agree with the Roman Church. And there are lots of accounts of what happened during those 1260 years from 538 to 1798. And we've mentioned some of that before, but we will probably touch on it again later this evening as we look at what this power did over time. So this church has to be a Roman church according to the Revelation 13 account, because he's given his seat and authority from Rome. Now, in 476 AD, the Roman Empire is divided into 10 kingdoms. 3 of them were eliminated by Rome, incidentally, by the Roman Church, and the rest are the current nations of Europe. In fact, those 3 nations don't exist anymore. They were taken out by the roots, as Daniel 7 says, and they no longer exist. In 538 AD, the Bishop of Rome was made the head over all of the church and began to use the power of the state to persecute what they called heretics. Now, if you go to your dictionary and you look up the word heretic, you'll find an interesting definition of the word heretic. The word heretic means one who thinks for himself. So, based on that definition, I hope that all of you in this audience are fellow heretics as I am, because God wants us to think for ourselves. He said in the book of Isaiah, "Come, let us reason together." He wants you to use your reasoning faculties to make a decision about where you will spend eternity, right? So we should all be heretics according to the dictionary definition. But whoever disagreed with Rome, they put to death. And the church consolidated its power. Soon the Roman Church became the dominant church-state power in Europe and began to flex its religious muscles. Over the course of 1,260 years of papal domination, over 50 million quote-unquote heretics were put to death by the Roman Church. So when Revelation 17 says that she is drunk with the blood of the saints, you can see that on a massive scale, she fulfilled that prophecy. Now, let's look at the testimony of the early reformers. Now, most Protestants today are not aware of their history. In fact, most Protestants today don't really know what the early reformers believed. But all of the early reformers, whether we're talking about Luther or Calvin or Zwingli or any of the others that you can name, any of the leaders of the Protestant Reformation, and even beyond that, people like Wesley and Moody and so on, Sir Isaac Newton, every last one of them identified the little horn of Daniel 7 and the sea beast of Revelation 13, 1 and 2. They all identified that power as the Roman Catholic papacy. Every last one. So let's take a look now at some of the statements of the early reformers, just to document what I'm saying, so you know that I'm not just talking through my hat here. These are actual statements from the early reformers. This is Martin Luther, who said, it's a much longer quote, and I couldn't get it all on my screen, so I'm just giving you the part that is interesting for us. The Pope is the Antichrist, whom the world expects according to a general belief, because everything so exactly corresponds to the way of his life, action, words, and commandments. This, by the way, is from a book, actually a series of books. I think there were 4 volumes by Leroy Froom called The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers. Dr. Froom went to Europe and studied in the libraries of Europe to see how it is that the early reformers, the church fathers of the Protestant Reformation, how they interpreted prophecy. That's why the title of the book is Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers. He wanted to find out, how did the early reformers like Luther and Calvin and Zwingli and others, how did they interpret these prophecies? And what he found is exactly what I'm showing you here on the screen. He found that they all identified the Roman Catholic papacy as the little horn of Daniel 7, as we said, and the sea beast of Revelation 13, and the harlot of Revelation 17. Here is John Calvin. Some think us too severe when we call the Roman pontiff Antichrist. But those who are of this opinion do not consider that they bring the same charge against Paul. Now, which Paul is he talking about? He's talking about the Apostle Paul himself, whose language we adopt. Paul's words in 2 Thessalonians 2 are not capable of any other interpretation than that which applies them to the papacy. Now, what is interesting these days is that most evangelicals apply the prophecy of 2 Thessalonians 2 to the Antichrist, who is, of course, arising outside of the church. But the early reformers all applied that prophecy of Paul to the Roman papacy. And so most Protestants are unaware of their history. This is why we need to pay attention to the historical information so that we know and understand our roots. Because if we don't understand our roots, we are in danger of being destroyed. Remember that at the Council of Trent, which began in 1545, remember that the Jesuits were commissioned to destroy the Protestant Reformation. And from what I can see out there, they've done a pretty good job, because Jesuit doctrine has really penetrated heavily the church. So, that's what Luther and Calvin and all of the others, as we mentioned before, further down in time, Wesley and others. Sir Isaac Newton, who we all know was a scientist, but he also identified the papacy as the little horn of Daniel 7. Now, further along in Revelation 17, we find that the angel tells the mystery of the woman and so on, but I want you to notice the last part of this. It says, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. I'll tell you a funny little story. One time, I was sharing some Bible stories for children with a woman that I had just met who was interested in them. And somehow we got on the topic of Revelation 17, and she opened up her Bible. She was kind of excited. She opened up her Bible and she read this verse, especially the part about the 7 heads or 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And she said to me, I know who this is. I know who this Babylon is. And I said, you do? She said, yes, it's Rome. It's the Roman papacy. I thought that was very interesting. Just that clue, because everybody knows Rome sits on 7. In fact, they talk about the 7 hills of Rome, you know. So she figured it out. She got the message that, yes, Rome sits on 7 hills. And so it's talking about the Roman Church. Well, Daniel 7, let's go back to Daniel 7 and look again at the sequence. There were 3 beasts, remember? A lion, a bear, a leopard, and then the dragon beast. The lion, Babylon, the bear, Medo-Persia, the leopard, Greece, and then Rome, the dragon beast. And you see there's a sequence, there's a flow of history here. One of the things that Jesuits have done is they have taken the flow of history, interrupted it, for instance, taken the 70th week of Daniel 9 and pushed it all the way into the future. That's illegitimate. The prophecy began in the time of Babylon, because that's where Daniel was, and proceeded. In fact, when Daniel was older, Babylon was conquered by Medo-Persia. Cyrus the Great came, diverted the river Euphrates, went under the gates, and came in while Belshazzar was having his riotous feast, and Babylon was conquered in one night. And so there is a flow. Babylon then was superseded by Medo-Persia. Medo-Persia was later superseded by Greece, the leopard, the symbol of the leopard, and then finally the dragon beast Rome. Rome took the place of Greece. And so that flow of history is very obvious, and to take the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9 and push it all the way into the future is entirely illegitimate. But this is exactly what Jesuit doctrine has done to the Christian church. And now everybody believes in a rapture as proposed by, as we mentioned before, Francisco Ribera, who presented the futurist rapture theory. And if you go into a Christian bookstore these days, as I probably mentioned last week, you can't find any book on prophecy that doesn't have Jesuit doctrine in it. Nobody uses the doctrines that of the Antichrist that were given by the Protestant reformers, the interpretations of the scriptures that were the common belief in the time of Luther and Zwingli and Calvin and so on. So Protestants have lost their understanding of history, and really they've lost an understanding of who they are. And that's a very sad thing, really. Now, in Daniel 7, we find this statement. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, and we identified that as Rome, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. Notice that Rome was considered to be the Iron Kingdom, and this beast had iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from the beast before it, and that certainly was true. And it had, notice, 10 horns. This, of course, is a reference to the 10 kingdoms that were generated after the Roman Empire lost its power, the barbarian invasions from the north. Now Daniel says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, notice, coming up among them. Among them who? Among the 10 horns. So what you have is the Roman Empire, and then the Roman Empire devolving into 10 kingdoms after it lost its power. And out of those 10 kingdoms comes the little horn. You see, there is an historical flow here that we must not ignore, because the little horn comes out of the 10 horns. You see, that's very important. Before whom 3 of them were plucked up by the roots, those 3 kingdoms that were destroyed by Rome. And there, in this horn, were eyes, notice, like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. So, we have a description of a person. Eyes like a man. Interesting terminology here. Now, Daniel decides that he wants to understand the truth about this fourth beast. Then I wish to know the truth about the fourth beast and the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell. That is the little horn, namely that horn which had, notice, eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words. A little further on in the chapter, in Daniel 7:25, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High. The Most High, of course, is God. Pompous words against God. Notice, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. In other words, 3.5 years, 1260 days, a day for a year. Exactly the period of domination of the Roman Church. Because in 538, the bishop was declared to be the head of the church, and for 1260 years, 1798 was the end of it, they dominated Europe and reveled in the blood of the saints. So, let's look at this expression, shall intend to change times and law. You'll notice that it says intend. It doesn't say that this power, the little horn power, actually changes God's times and God's law. It says intend, which means that there are some people who are not following the little horn power, because he only intends to change. He doesn't actually change it. Changing the times, that's a reference to God's prophetic calendar. Remember, I mentioned just a few minutes ago that Francisco Ribera, the Jesuit, took the 70th week of God's prophetic calendar and pushed it into the future. That's the kind of thing that the Bible was talking about, changing God's prophetic calendar, the timing of the things that God said would happen. Now, the 70 weeks was, of course, the probation for the nation of Israel, which began in 457 when the command was given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, all the way, and if you count from 457 BC, all the way to the time when the church, the period when Stephen was stoned in AD 34, that's the end of the 490 days, or the 70 weeks. That was the final rejection. Stephen was the last prophet because he indicted the Sanhedrin and told them that they were stiff-necked, just like their fathers. And what was their response to his prophetic interpretation of their stiff-neckedness? They stoned him to death. Stephen was put to death. That in AD 34. That was the end of the 490 years of probation for Israel. And so he intended, of course, to change times and law. The law, of course, is what we studied last week, that the Roman Church made changes in the Ten Commandments, or intends to make change, intended. They took the second commandment out completely. That's the commandment that forbids idolatry, bowing down to anything that is an idol. Of course, there's the idol of Mary in the church that they bow to or genuflect to. So that commandment was removed, and in the Roman Catholic Bible, you will not find the second commandment, which forbids idolatry. It's gone. But of course, everybody knows there are 10 commandments. So what they did was they took the last commandment, which forbids covetousness, and split it in two to preserve 10 commandments, the number 10. But what they did, of course, is illegitimate, and that's what the Bible means when it says they will intend to change times and the law. And of course, as we studied last week, one of the changes they made is the substitution of sun worship, the day of the sun, for the Sabbath. So, changing the times, the prophetic calendar, and attempting to change the law of God. All right, so let's move along. Now, Revelation 13 identifies this beast. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. There is that term again, blasphemous, pompous. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. Remember the leopard in Daniel 7? His feet were like what? Feet of a bear. See, it's using the same symbols, which is why we need to study Daniel and Revelation together. All right? And his mouth like the mouth of a, there it is, mouth of a lion. So the same symbol, lion, bear, leopard, and then dragon beast. Right? Same symbol. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. Now Revelation 13 not only uses the same symbols as Daniel chapter 7, but now it expands and gives us more detail. The little horn power, the sea beast here, same as the sea beast, receives a deadly wound. That deadly wound was the arrest of the Pope by Napoleon's general Berthier in 1798. General Berthier walked into the Vatican. The Pope was on his throne and arrested him, took him off his throne, and took him into exile, and he died in exile. And the power of the Roman papacy was broken. He received a deadly wound. But remember, this says that the deadly wound is going to be healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" By the way, Revelation 19 answers the question, who is able to make war with him? Because it shows Jesus on a white horse coming. If you read carefully, it says, with the armies of heaven. So who is going to make war with this beast? The answer is Jesus and the armies of heaven. That's who. So it answers that question. All right? Okay, so Revelation 13 not only uses the same symbols of Daniel 7, but it goes further to talk about this deadly wound that he would receive, and that the deadly wound would be healed. Now, in Revelation 17, we find this. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand, notice, a golden cup full of abominations. Now, before it said she had a cup with the wine of her fornication, but here it says abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And of course she's drunk with the blood of the saints. Now, Revelation 18 also identifies Babylon. But this time it expands on what is given in Revelation 17. After those things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. Now, think about this. The first angel the message goes to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Remember that? This is a worldwide message also, because the whole earth is illuminated with the message of this angel. The angel cries mightily with a loud voice, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. See, there's the repetition of Revelation 14:8. And has become, now notice the detail that it adds, has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison of every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich with the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. Revelation 18, 1-4. So, we have some more details here. We find that Babylon is in a threefold union. First of all, she has a relationship with the kings of the earth, the political systems of the earth. And if you notice carefully, you will see that the current pope, who by the way is the first Jesuit pope in history, he is making his rounds to the kings of the earth. He went before the United Nations, I believe in, 2015, 2018 maybe, and made his pitch for climate change, and oh my, he got 193 countries applauded him, and he's making his rounds. Not only that, but it says the merchants of the earth. That's the business community. That's why the Jeff Bezos of the earth are going to the Vatican to kiss the Pope's ring, because there is a relationship with the merchants of the earth. The Bill Gates and others out there, the merchants of the earth, are in league with Babylon. And so there's a union that is coming and is being developed. And you will notice that there is a voice from heaven, but this is not the voice of the angel. It says, I heard another voice from heaven. How do we identify who this voice is? Because it says, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins and receive her plagues. Now, a couple of things that this means. One, this is the voice of God himself, because it says, my people. That's the first thing. So this is not the angel, this is the voice of God. Secondly, if he is calling his people out of Babylon, it means that there are God's people in Babylon. And there are millions of honest people in the Protestant churches who have received Jesuit doctrine and in the Roman Catholic communion that are honest, that love the Lord, that want to serve him, but they don't realize who Babylon is. They don't realize that there is demonic power operating in that church. Notice, a dwelling place for demons. That's a pretty strong indictment, but it's the indictment of the church in the end of time. That demonic power is involved in this church power. And we see that in some of the charismatic kinds of things that are going on out there, speaking in tongues and all, the people rolling around on the floor and all these kinds of things. We see manifestation of it out there in many of the Protestant churches, where spiritualism is really raising its ugly head, and where we see manifestations of spiritualism in the church. And that's been going on actually for years and years. People touching people on the head and they're falling over and foaming at the mouth and all of this kind of thing. This has been going on for a long time. And this kind of demonic activity is everywhere in the Christian church these days. Not in all of the churches, but certainly in the churches that are influenced by these charismatic, spiritualistic manifestations. So, God is calling his people out of Babylon. Now, the Apostle Paul identifies this power in no uncertain terms. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day, that is the day of the Lord, the coming of Jesus, will not come unless the falling away comes first. By the way, that word that is translated falling away is the Greek word apostasia, which we get the word apostasy from. So it's talking about a Christian church that apostatizes. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. Now, there are only two places in the Bible where that term, the son of perdition, is used. The first time it was used, listen carefully, the first time it was used to describe somebody in the church. In fact, this person that it is used to describe not only was a member of the church, this person was a member of the 12 apostles. And I'm referring, of course, to Judas. So it's a description of somebody in the church, not some antichrist outside of the church. Very important. And so the son of perdition is that description. Hold on, let me. Okay. The son of perdition. Now, he shows himself above all that is called God, that is worshipped, so that he sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now, the Jesuit interpretation of this scripture is that the Jewish temple is going to be rebuilt, and Antichrist is going to be in that temple and persecute the Jews. The problem is that the Apostle Paul, when he uses the word temple, never refers to a building. It's always to the church. Notice Ephesians 2. This is one example. But every time he uses temple, he's talking about the Christian church. In fact, he's talking about, in many instances, the body temple. You are the temple of the living God, and so on. So he's talking about the church, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being, notice, the cornerstone of this building, so it's not a physical building, whom the whole building, being fitted together, grows into a, notice, an holy temple in the Lord. It's talking about the church, not a building, in whom you also are being built together for a dwelling place of God in the Spirit. You see, this is a spiritual temple. It is not some temple in the Middle East. And you know, this is typical of Jesuit strategy. Let's focus on the Middle East. All eyes are on the Middle East, and none of those eyes are on Rome, where the real Antichrist is, who Martin Luther and Calvin called the Antichrist. We need to get back to our roots. Our roots say that the Antichrist is not from outside the church. The Antichrist is from inside the church. Back in the time of Jerusalem, Jesus said to the church back then, "Your house is left unto you desolate. that house that was abandoned by Jesus for the last time at this pronouncement and was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70, never to be considered to be the temple of God again. So when Jesus declared, "Your house is left unto you desolate," it means that God is not going to inhabit any temple built by the Jews again. Remember, the real temple is in heaven. Hebrews chapter 8 and verses 1 and 2. Now, this is the main point of the things we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary of the true tabernacle, which the Lord erected and not man. Remember that the tabernacle that was built in the desert and the one that Solomon built and later on that was rebuilt, that building was a copy of the true tabernacle in heaven. In Revelation 19, or rather 11:19, we find the following declaration. Then the temple of God was opened where? See, there it is, in heaven. And the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. Where's the ark of the covenant? In the temple in heaven. And what's in the ark of the covenant? The answer is the Ten Commandments. So you see that we're not talking about a physical building on earth, which is really, as we said before, Jesuit theology. We are talking about the temple in heaven. So, this is a statement by one of the websites that I found, historical websites, Historia Ecclesiastica. And it says this: "It is one of the leading doctrines of Romanism that the Pope is the visible head of the universal Church of Christ, invested with supreme authority over bishops and pastors and all parts of the world. More than this, the Pope has been given the very titles of deity. He has been called Lord God the Pope and has been declared infallible. He demands the homage of all men. The same claim is urged by Satan in the wilderness of temptation, and it is still urged by him to yield him homage." And so what we have here is a system that for centuries has persecuted the Christian church, has infiltrated the church with Jesuit doctrine, and has essentially attempted to destroy the Protestant faith. And many of the Protestant churches have swallowed the Jesuit doctrine hook, line, and sinker. And because of that, we find, if you turn on television, if you go to YouTube, nearly all of the pastors out there in the Protestant churches are preaching Jesuit doctrine. That is, a future Antichrist who is going to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and persecute the Jews for 7 years, and so on and so on. All of which came from Francisco Ribera, the Jesuit who presented that information back in the 16th century, and which has been adopted. So, I want to encourage you, be faithful. Jesus said, "Be faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life." The Lord wants us to be faithful to him and faithful to the scriptures. Now, last week I gave you a little assignment we were looking at the verses in the New Testament that pointed to the first day of the week. And I hope that you are paying attention to this. One last thing. We need to recognize that millions of Catholics are completely unaware of this biblical identification of the Roman Church as the system that houses the man of sin. Through a stealth and new popular Jesuit doctrines, the Roman Church is steadily gathering influence in Protestant circles and among the world's religions. Rome does not talk of the return of Christ. It expects to establish a church-state rule for 1,000 years, a millennial rule on earth, in opposition to the rule of Christ and his saints, who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. So I hope that you benefited from our study tonight, and next week we're going to look at the message of the third angel, the one that warns about the mark of the beast, and that's found in Revelation 14 also. So thank you for staying with us tonight and listening, and we will again convene another community Bible study next week at the same time, 7:30. I hope that you will see fit to join us. I hope that you will be one of those heretics who, like the Bereans, search the scriptures for themselves to see if those things are so. Thank you, and good night.